Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Procurify. If you've enjoyed the content we put out here, a great way to say thank you, after obviously giving us a 5-star review and sharing with your friends, is checking out Procurify. Procurify is the procure to pay platform for charter schools. Basically, that means they help your school manage all the various manual aspects of the purchasing process in one platform. You can learn more at byq.org/procurify. That's Procurify. All right, now back to the show.
Welcome to Charter School Insider, lessons from the nation's top charter school operators, the only podcast dedicated to the behind-the-scenes business of running a successful charter school. Join us as we sit down with charter school leaders who share how they are overcoming the biggest operational hurdles facing their schools today.
Yeime, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel.
I am really excited for our conversation, and I have to start with some context for our listeners. So, for people who don't know you or don't know Brilla Public Charter Schools, could you start by giving us just a couple quick highlights on the organization and your background? You're now the executive director, CEO, but I know you've been with the organization for a little while, so would love to hear a little bit about your background as well.
Thank you. Well, Brilla Public Charter Schools, or Brilla Schools, we opened our schools in 2013, our first school, our flagship here in the South Bronx. This is our 12th year of operation, and since then, we now run 6 schools, and we are scheduled to open 2 more middle schools next year. What's different about Brilla? That's what I like to tell people rather than you can always go to our website and check us out, but I think that the most important things about us is that Bria builds in character, meaning that we're not only, of course, schools are in the business of educating children, right? Teaching them how to read and write, but we also want them to be good people. So character is very important for us, character formation, who they are as a person, how they treat each other. So that's one of our core foundations of who we are at Bria. Another thing that is different about Bria is that Bria is parents are our partners. So we believe as parents, families, as the first educators, parents are truly part of everything that we do, and we involve them in everything that we do. And we are very upfront with parents, right? Like there's many charter schools, many amazing educational institutions, especially here in New York. But for us, we expect you to be very involved because we want to be your partner. We are helping you to educate your child. It's not the other way around. So for us, that's really important. And also, like Bria features the arts. The arts is really important for us. So you come to a Bria classroom and you'll see that we have a pretty robust fine and applied arts department and programs that all our children. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Bria schools are K through 8. Our children receive every grade, every day, some class that it's geared towards the arts because that's part of being a whole human. I think that's what I can tell you about Brea. And about me, well, I've been with the organization since founding, and I started in operations. Operations is my background. I always tell people that I'm a businesswoman. I've been in different roles, and I very proudly tell people all the time, the staff, now that we have nearly 400 staff members, listen, when we opened, it was like 25 of us. We all fit in one classroom and
Yep.
we were just like changing the world. And, I put together the first report card template, the first interview template. We were the first HR department, the first social work department, right? Because when you open a school, you don't have any of those things. So I'm really proud of being, like I tell everybody, like Bria is my home. I've been here for a long time and I'm very proud of all the work that we've done and the life that we are changing one child at a time.
Incredible. Well, it's so fun to hear about the growth the organization's seen, both on just from a staff perspective, but also set to open 2 more schools. One of the things that's really unique about CEOs like yourself that come through the operations side, like you said, you call yourself a businesswoman. A lot of times CEOs are academic. They were a teacher and then maybe a lead teacher, principal, and then they work their way up to leading the organization. And there's all sorts of strengths that come with that. But oftentimes, once you get to the CEO role, you realize you're running a business. You're hiring and firing. You've got to manage the budget. You're keeping the organization centered on the mission. And so I'm really excited to talk about specifically kind of where it all starts, which is proper resource allocation, keeping the organization afloat and really in a strong position. It's no secret in the charter school community, there have been challenges nationwide with enrollment. ESSER funds have sunset. There's challenges with budgets getting squeezed. And so could you just share a little bit about what the last 18 months have looked like for Brilla as it relates to some of those challenges, whether that be on the enrollment front or how you all have navigated sort of the more recent challenges as it relates to resource allocation?
Yeah, well, listen, I guess I like everybody else, right? Where are the kids? That's the question. Like, where are the kids? I have to say, I don't know if struggle is the word. Like, I think that a couple of months ago, I would have said like struggling to like market ourselves and doing like all these things that we're not honestly like not used to doing. Like pre-pandemic, we did not have to go out there and try to sell our school to anybody. It was very clear who we were. In our community, families would just come through the door. We had to do very minimal work. And trust me, I was in charge of recruiting students. So I was the one going to daycares and all of these places. There was not as much saturation. When we opened our schools 12 years ago, there were only 4 charter schools in the neighborhood. Now we have
Wow.
12, right? So there is a difference there. So yeah, it's been eye-opening and actually have forced us to have to like think harder, not only about resource allocation and what's possible and what's not possible, but also about like who we said that we were going to be, 12, 13, 15 years ago when somebody thought of this amazing idea of opening a Brilla school and who we actually are based on like what our environment, our ecosystem looks like. So yeah, it's been different. It's been challenging at times, but I think all for a good reason though. Like I truly believe, especially this for charter schools, right? Like it's not static. Movement is absolutely necessary if we want to make a difference. Our communities change, times change, reality hits. If we write the script and we never go back and look at the script and say, let me see how I can make this better, we are not doing what's best for our children, our community. So yeah, challenging at times, but also eye-opening and a huge learning like opportunity here.
I want to get into some of those learnings because, as you mentioned, it's really kind of pushed the organization to go back to the original vision, challenge the organization in new ways, whether that be on the enrollment front or probably operationally. And you and I had a conversation a number of weeks ago about this. And one of the things you had brought up was the organization thinking about creating kind of a dynamic approach to budgeting. Like you mentioned, communities are not stagnant. Families are moving in, families are moving away, and the organization has to adapt. And so I want to kind of dissect this tiered approach that you all came up with, because I think there's probably some interesting learnings for others across the country who may not be in New York City, but may be feeling some similar challenges. Could you take us back maybe to like 18 months ago or 24 months ago to some of the conversations you and the rest of the leadership team were having as you were looking at the changing market, digesting some of these challenges? Could you tell us a little bit about like how did you start the process of developing your budget for this current academic year?
Well, the first thing that I have to say, like I've been in the organization for many years, but never on this seat, right? This was not my seat. Yes, I was there. I was listening. I knew that we're having enrollment challenges, but I was never really like preview to like how deep this issue was and the real life implications of low enrollment. When I looked at the budget and it's like, okay, so this is our target number, right? Like this is how many kids we said that we were going to serve, right? And we said this a number of years ago. And then there is our budget enrollment. This is what we hope that we can hit. And I started thinking, like, I look at it and I started thinking, I was like, well, but if in the last 3-4 years, we know that we're not hitting this target enrollment. And then we have this budget enrollment that it looks to me very much like this is more or less what we're going to get. So why do we continue to operate our organization and our everything, like our budgets are making the assumption that we're serving X number of kids when we know that in reality, we're not doing that. So I think that to me, that was like the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, we cannot pass a budget that says that we're going to be serving 2,000 students when we know that in reality, we're going to be short 300 students.
Hmm.
So to me, it was like, okay, so first of all, let's start like looking at how many children we have at each school, and let's make sure that our budget is responsive to that, right? Like we're not buying paper for 400 students, we're buying paper for 280. So let's
Right,
adjust
right.
that, right? Like, why are we budgeting for this number of teachers if we only have 280? Well, those are not my numbers, by the way. I'm just like making
Yeah.
up numbers right here,
Hypotheticals here.
but
Yeah.
hypothetical numbers, right? So why are we doing these things? Like everything needs to be adjusted. That was kind of the genesis of this idea. Okay, so our budget needs to be responsive to the number of students that we have in the classrooms, and that's where everything started.
That's a hard conversation because essentially what you're saying is we need to live in reality and not in what we wish or hope reality was. And maybe this ties back to your experience on the business side of the house, coming in and just saying like, hey folks, I'm an operator here, and these numbers, the math is not mathing. And what was the conversation like with some of the other key stakeholders? Because it's one thing for you as the leader to say, okay, I get that this is the sort of gap we're living in. That can be a sensitive topic and a hard conversation to have with the rest of your leadership team, especially if it means maybe we need to fire staff, maybe we need to really take a hard look at the budget. So how did you think about taking that kind of message to the other stakeholders? What were some of those conversations like?
Well, first, I have to say that it was not easy, though. It was not easy for anybody, right? Even my C-suite, when we started having this conversation, you can see their faces and be like, what do you mean? What are you trying to do here, right? It creates like this sense of like we're failing, right? That maybe we're not doing what we said that we are gonna do, and I understand all of that. So everything started with education. People need to know. People need to understand the reality. And I have to say that, first of all, it was hard no matter at what level of the organization. It was hard for the board. It was hard for my C-suite. It was hard for the senior leaders. It was hard for school principals. It was hard for schools. It was hard for everyone because it's right. It's having to come to change is gonna come, and change is hard. Even if it's gonna be good change,
Yep.
it's hard because it's different, and people are always afraid of change. So the first thing that I did, well, first of all, like I talked to my CFO. He's a rock star. He's amazing, and he started like working with our financial models, right, to make sure that we accommodating like what we were thinking about, and doing some back of the envelope like numbers, right, game, right there, just to make sure that we were gonna be able to stay sustainable, while at the same time having conversations with principals, leadership teams, and making sure that everybody understood. But it was really showing them the reality. What I learned, Daniel, which was shocking to me, is that some of our principals, like, yes, they noticed that there were less kids, right? Like, these are highly motivated, like, teachers, and they're in the business of educating children, and that's the right thing to do. But they're not financial experts, though. And they're like, okay, there's less kids,
Right,
but
right.
it's fine, I guess. Like, everything seems fine. Nobody's talking about this. Nobody's putting pressure on this. And so I guess that everything is okay, right? Money must be pouring from somewhere, right? So that's how I started.
Right.
I said, let me show you. Let's get in a room and let me show you how was our enrollment was a couple of years ago. Let me show you like all these funds that we were receiving that we will stop receiving very soon. And let me show you where we are now. And it was an eye opening. And they were, even though there was a lot of nervousness, we have a co leadership model here at Brilla. So our principals and our director of operations work as partners. So the conversation was with the two of them, and then with a group of them, all our DOs and our principals. And yes, it was scary. And they knew something was happening because they can see around, and they have the friends that work at all the schools, and they're talking about these things. And they were appreciative that we were telling them the truth. And also that we talked to them very early in the process, and we did not make the decisions for them. That's the other thing. All I said is we cannot continue to operate this way because it's just like the math, like you said, the math is not math, like it's not, right? This is the number of children, this is our per pupil, like this is not like aligning. You tell me what we're gonna do about that. So it wasn't like that we were pushing decisions, like from the network, right? We knew, we had an idea of, okay, it looks like we might have to like cut down on this. It looks like we might have to have less staff members. It looks like we're gonna have to do that. But we had to give them some agency in the decision making process, right? Let them be part of the conversation. And that's what happened. We had several meetings with them and the senior leadership of the network, and we were like, let's look at the budget. And we went line by line and we said, what are you doing here? Is there any better way to do this? How many teachers do you need? Do you actually need these teachers? And we went to a very comprehensive set of meetings after meetings after meetings. And sometimes were difficult meetings, right? Because some principals, we divided them between elementary school and middle school principals. And of course, the four elementary school principals, they had to agree. All right, I guess that we have one less find and apply
Right.
art teachers. They had to agree to that. And I think that's what made it not easier, because it's not easy, but they were part of the process. It was not something that was pushed down on them because the network here like knows better. No, no, these are your schools and we want you to be part of the process. And they responded. Again, difficult, but they were partners and they were very much part of all the decisions that we made.
Yeah, it sounds like transparency. You used a better word, which is education, really bringing these people into the decision making process was critical to building consensus within the organization. You mentioned there was, meetings after meetings, and there's kind of various layers of the organization. Can you talk us through what was like the sequence? Was it you and the C-suite sort of came up with in partnership with your CFO, came up with kind of like, here's our different potential models, and you all agreed on those, and then you took those to your senior directors, and then you took it to the principals? What was maybe the sequence, and then how much time passed as you were having this? Because I'm sure people are wondering, how did Yeime and team do this? Was this over the course of one really hard week? Was this months and months? Maybe talk us through kind of the process portion of this.
Yes, yes. So the way that it happened is that I had this realization and I talked to my C-suite and my CFO. We were having these conversations in the summer of 2023, right? Like we were working on our 24-25 budget. So we started like early because those changes were going to be implemented in
For
the
this school year.
2024 for this school year.
Right.
So January 26, 2024, the entire network knew about these changes. We started the process between February and April of 2023. We started talking about this. And it was first the C-suite that we talk about it. And basically what we did here, what we settle on is how is it that this budget is going to work? And we established that we were going to have 3 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So tier 1, the tier 1 budget is a budget that is core to running schools. And what is it that is crucial that we need and must have for us to be able to meet our strategic priorities, right? And make good on the promises we make to our families. So this is like keeping your lights on.
Yeah, the bare minimum.
The bare minimum, right? And I don't even like to use the word bare minimum because it's not really the bare minimum, but what we promise to families, this is how much money we need to be able to deliver on the promises that we made to families, right? Without making any dramatic changes to like the core of who we are. And this includes basic supplies, having a teacher in every classroom, what core instructional and support roles we needed, resources that we deem to be truly mission critical. And that was tier 1. If we have less than this, then we will be on a deficit. Then tier 2 is the same, but with added resources, right? So what additional roles will help us achieve our priorities faster, right? And that's why it's important that we had our principals, our director of operations, like telling us and working with us on what they thought those resources were going to be. These include like extra support staff and more support for like the well-being. And then tier 3 is like, what are the nice to have, right? This includes like having co-teachers, added extra field trips, or school culture budgets, or like things of that nature that are not core to, I don't want to say not core to our mission, but are not core for us to conduct our business, but that it will things that will be like nice to have. That's the work that we did. between February and April of 2023.
And did each of those tiers, were each of those tied to a specific enrollment number, or was it a combination of enrollment plus if we get awarded this grant or if this philanthropic donation comes through, or was it strictly if this is how many students we're serving?
Strictly enrollment,
Okay.
because those are the things that we can per pupil is the one thing that we can predict.
You can track, right?
Everything else, it's outside of our control. And if that happens, then we also had another list of things. Yes, we would like to have this summer program and we would like to have this high dosage tutoring. There is another list that lives somewhere in case like these other funds come. But for this model specifically, it's tied up to per pupil and how many students we have in our schools.
Got it. That makes sense. So as you're having conversations with the team rolling this out, you tell like the whole organization knows in January that this is coming. And then I assume that kicks off sort of your series of ongoing meetings. What were some of the principal operations co-leader meetings like? Like, I'm curious if there was anything that surprised you as you brought them into the process in terms of things where they were like, here's the real opportunity for efficiency, or what were some of the learnings as you had those conversations, if anything specifically jumps out?
For me, the biggest thing was like to know how much they want to be part of those conversations. To me, that was the biggest learning. Like, of course, we learn many things here and
Sure,
there,
sure.
but because we are always, as a network, we're always trying to protect their time. We're always trying to make sure that everybody's working efficiently and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and we're not taking their time, right? And sometimes what happens with that is that we're making decisions that we think that they don't want to be part of that because they rather be observing, they rather be talking to their parents, they rather be doing all these things. And they do, though. Those are their core responsibilities. But I was very pleasantly surprised to see how much they appreciated that we brought them to the table. So yes, we were having these conversations in February to April at the C-suite level, at the senior leadership level in the network. Once school started, we brought them into the conversation. So early in the fall, they were meeting with us and we were looking at everything together as partners. And by December, we were meeting sometimes twice a week, right? And can you imagine, right? Like with principals and
Right.
the time that it took for us to be able to agree. And there were separate meetings. We had to think of our students with disability. What was the impact for our multi-language learners? Tons of implications, right? Or tons of people that we needed to tap into for us to be able to do this. By December of 2023, decisions were already made as a group. These are the positions that we have. These are the positions that have been eliminated, that we're going to eliminate for the following year. And then it was a question of communication, right? What the communication cascade. It was interesting because there was a little bit of back and forth, even within my team, was about the timing of the communication, right? Because some people said, are you really going to tell people in January that there is no job for them in like July 1st?
Yeah, and expect them to show up for work the next day or not
Yes.
be taking that 3-hour lunch break. Yeah.
Yes. And everybody was like, bye. Like, I think that it's too early. Let's think about this. Maybe let's hold off a little bit before we communicate it. And we came to a conclusion. It's going to be hard, but we're going to operate with integrity. I'm not going to be sitting on our principals or like the senior leaders, the network team, sitting here knowing that this person we're going to have more opportunities to find a job if they already know that their position is not going to be available. You know, they're going to get mad, but I think that at the end of the day, they're going to respect us more because we're operating with a high sense of integrity. And we did it. In January, we started the conversations. Like I told you before, by January 26th, everyone in the network knew exactly what we were going to do. At Brilla, in January, between January and February, we have two pretty important, I don't want to call them events, but one is a time in which we talk and we unveil any new initiative for next year, any changes that we're going to do. That's our annual update. And for that, we bring our entire staff, network staff and school-based staff into a space. And then we talk to them about this is new, this is what we're thinking, this is how we're going, and we give them updates. We talked a little bit about where we are. We show them, okay, so this is our NWA, how we did it. This is how we're progressing towards our goals. So they have a good idea of where we are. And last year, for those changes, that's when I unveiled it. Now, the people that were going to be affected by them, we talked to them before,
Yeah.
prior to that, because you don't want that to be a
Right.
surprise for anybody. The people are already informed. But it was a very tight communications plan that we created to make sure that everyone was communicated. Emails went out afterwards. And then 2 weeks later, we have our annual state of the schools, in which then we say, like, here, this is how we're going to move forward. It's kind of like a different tone, not so much about like what we've done, but this is like moving forward. So yeah, by January, and of course it came with us with, quite some challenges. It was difficult, but we led with integrity. We led with transparency. That, by the way, I always tell my colleagues, is transparency doesn't mean that people need to know everything.
Right.
Like that's not what transparency means. Transparency means that what is appropriate for you to know, and when it's timely for you to know, we're going to make sure that you know it. That's my message always to our network, and that's how we operated. And it was difficult, but it was successful.
So here you are it's November 19th when we're recording this, 2024. You all are planning to open 2 new schools. You've kind of gone through this challenging time of taking a hard look at enrollments, the budget, building these tiers, talking about, staff reduction, program reduction. And I imagine you've learned a lot as a leader. You've already shared some of those learnings along the way throughout this conversation. I wanted to ask you specifically for other CEOs or leaders of organizations who, may be listening to this. What are some of the things that, as you look back on kind of everything you all have navigated, what are some of the things that you're grateful you took the time to do? And I'm going to ask you the reverse. What are some of the things maybe you didn't do that you wish you had done? But let's start with some of the things where you're, really grateful. And I think what you just shared about transparency is obviously a good one. Any others that come to mind?
Explaining of the why, and the explaining of the why, it's not for my fellow CEOs. The explaining of the why, it's not an email that you blast to the entire school community.
But an email's so much easier, Yeime. Come on. And now
You
AI can write my email and I can tell them to make it happy.
exactly, which is why that's not the explaining of the why. Like, get in front of your people. They have to see you. Like, talk to them, explain the why, and explain the why once, right? Like the why in your communication, and the why have to be infused in every time you communicate with them. To me, that was the biggest lesson, and that's what I will tell, and over and over and over. Listen, communication is a two-way street. Like, doesn't matter what I'm trying to say. I could be screaming in a corner, like trying. If you don't understand what I'm saying, we're not communicating. We need to take the time to talk to our school leaders. We need to take the time to explain and never say, "Oh, I already told them this." And also remind them, because something that was also an important learning for me is like, we're doing a lot of things really good. We're doing really great things too, right? Everything is not doomsday. All
Right.
right. Yes, there's less kids, and those things are outside of our control, but there's a lot of really awesome work that we are doing at our schools. And we do not, because we're a lot of the time we're so concerned about being better and better and better and better, which is great, but we miss the opportunities to celebrate and to highlight the beautiful things that are happening at our school. And that's something that I learned from this process. Yes, we might have less staff members, but you know what? Like, we shorten your day because we want to offer more professional development. And yes, we align our calendar to the district calendar because we understand that there is an impediment because you're a parent, and it makes it really hard for you to find babysitting for your kid. Like all of these things that we're doing, yes, there's change and scary and all of that, but at the same time, they need to see what we're doing well and
Right.
what they're doing well. Highlight what they're doing well,
Mm-hmm.
the difference that they're making. To me, that's not a lesson, but to me, like the learning. And if anybody asks me, because this could be enrollment or could be anything else, I think these learnings are transferable. It doesn't matter what
Right.
you're dealing with, you have to spend the time to make sure that the why is solid and that you are letting your people know and you're communicating like through different venues. When I think about something that I wish I did,
And maybe to put a clarifier on this question, maybe it's not necessarily something that you specifically wish you could have done. Maybe it's just as a team, here's maybe a pitfall or two to avoid, or another organization could maybe learn from something that you all did where you maybe thought, on second thought, maybe it would be better to have, this meeting in groups of 2 instead of in groups of 10 or something like that.
I think that's something that I think that there needs to be coherence, right? And sometimes when we are thinking about a problem or a challenge, for example, like enrollment, we're thinking, okay, so we're married to who we think that we are. And I think that sometimes what I notice with my team is like trying to fit something where it doesn't fit anymore, right? Like these parts of our model are like very important, but then let's just not be afraid to have divergent ideas. This doesn't work anymore, and this is not Brilla anymore, or this is not whatever your school is anymore. Yeah, it was great when we had it, but it's not anymore.
Mhm.
To me, that will be because I think that there was a lot of tension into like, no, 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 this is a Brilla, this is a core Brilla element, and before you know it, everything was a core
Yeah.
Brilla element,
Right. We
and then
can't
we have
change
to go.
anything at all. Yeah.
Exactly. You can change anything because everything is core. Everything is so important. And everything. And you know what? Yes, a lot of things are important, but the recognition that we're in different times, my recommendation for anybody that is going through any process like this is just not to be afraid to think outside the box and also bring fresh. Actually, I think this is a really good one. When you've been in an environment for so long, that's all you're exposed to, that's all you
Yeah.
see, and we don't like foreigners. We don't want people coming and we're like, that's Abrea. Like, stay away because you don't know, right? Don't be afraid to bring those people. It was something
Right.
that I learned. It was great. Like people that were like, and why are you doing that? And pushing your thinking, that is always a good thing. People sometimes might not understand your language. Like talk to other people and see like what they think about your ideas and see if it makes sense for them, because if they cannot understand them, probably your people will be able to understand it. So I think that bringing like different perspective to the conversation is something that I wish I did more, but many things, we learn many things.
I love it. So many good learnings in there. All right. Well, as we come to a close here, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm hoping other leaders have appreciated it as much as I have learning from you, Yeime. Where should we send people if they want to learn more about Brilla, or if they want to connect with you, if they have questions for you? Should we send them to the website, LinkedIn? Where should we send people in the show notes?
Well, you can send them to the website for your school .org or to my LinkedIn too. Or you can put my email there. Like I'm always happy to answer people's questions. Like yeah, there are like different ways. LinkedIn or the website is also like a pretty straightforward way. I
Okay.
trust me, I get all the messages. I get them. When they're for me, they make sure that I get them.
All right, perfect. I love it. We won't put your personal email. If someone wants to
Not my personal email, my
request
Bria
your
email.
email, yeah, we'll go through the website. All right, and last question. I always ask all our guests this: as a leader, do you have any kind of tools, books, resources, other podcasts, things that you have found particularly helpful over the last couple of years as you've navigated this, that we could also share in our resources section?
It's so hard to point to like one specific resource, but I do have to say that when you're working on communications and communicating to a large group of people, to your networks, you need to have communications experts to help you. So I will, anybody that asks me, like a game changer is that we partner with like external communication experts. Like this is the message. Tell us how we can tell the
Yeah,
story in a better way. Because we're not communication experts. That's not what we are. So don't be afraid to engage with communication firms.
love it. Bring in the experts. All right. Well, Yeime, thanks again for coming on. This was great. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign-up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@byq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.